Hey, this is Mark, and welcome back to Beyond Profit, a Global Perspective. This time we're going to do a very sort of specialized thing, and that is the question, how can you figure out what country might be best for your business as part of your entry strategy? There's a very specific way that I go about trying to make that analysis, a specific tool that I use, and I want to share that with you. So, let's go. Before we get started, I wanted to remind you to please like this video, subscribe to this channel, leave some comments. I mean, if there's some things that you have questions about, or particularly if there's topics that you want to learn about and you'd like me to share that with you, then leave those in the comments below. Like I said, share this with other people. If this is something that you think would be helpful, maybe for other people in your class or other people who you know are working on business plans or just want to learn about some of this stuff, go ahead and share. I mean, I'm happy to help any way I can. So, why am I doing this video? This video is really designed for some specific audiences, right? First of all, I have students, some of whom are writing a global business plan. And this is a tool that we use so that these students can run the analysis in order to determine what kind of company might fit in a certain kind of global environment, a specific country, right? So that's the first audience. I also want to give a huge shout out to my fellow professor, Janet Graham. She actually introduced me to this tool. She learned about it through some people who do international business consulting. I've done some in the past as well, but I really like this tool. I think this is something that not just students can use, but is also used by many in the professional community. And if you're interested in taking a business someplace overseas, this is probably a good thing that you can use to do your research. I always tell my students, like, if you want to go do this at some point, you have to be able to satisfy a boss, an employer, a financier. Somebody's going to be looking at your research, and your research can't just be this sort of loosey-goosey subjective kind of thing, like, hey, I just looked at the internet and I compared this stuff, and right? It has to be data-based, it has to be systematic, right? You're trying to make a case that something that is in your head is actually going to work when you move it someplace in the world. So I think this is a really good tool that helps to achieve that. Janet and I refer to this tool as a decision matrix, and it has three major components. One is a PESTLE analysis, the second one is a cultural analysis, and the third part is a currency or exchange rate analysis. And I'd like to talk about each one in turn. Okay, so we're looking at the weighted decision matrix, and this is what we use to compare risk across countries, right? Which country do we want to get into, and what's the relative risk for all of this? So let me first say, before we get into talking about it and explaining what it all is, first let me say that I'm happy to share it with you, right? So this isn't something you have to necessarily recreate. If you find me on one of the various social media sites that I'm on, or leave a comment, try to contact me one way or another, I am happy to send you a copy of this. Like I said, this is something that I think is not only useful for students who are planning global business plans and stuff like that, but also for professionals who want to try to take a business overseas. So let's have a look at all of the parts and then break it down by section. So what you're going to be doing is looking at certain decision factors and using those to evaluate the relative risk of the countries that you're thinking about going into. So the top section here is what's considered to be a PESTLE analysis, right? That's an acronym. It's PESTLE, right? Political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental. And if you look here, there is a video link that will show you a video that explains all of those parts and what it is you're looking for, and to some extent how to analyze that. So I think that video would be very helpful for you, and that's something that you can get to right here. The next section of this matrix is to look at cultural values. Likewise, here's also a video that goes into Hofstede's analytics, talking about how it is that you can look at various aspects of culture and make that cross-cultural comparison, and then you will feed those numbers here into the cultural section. Finally, we have exchange rates, right? I have some videos on currency. You can see them here. You can link to those through my channel, and those will help you not only understand what causes currency rates to fluctuate, but also understand a little bit more about the things that you need to be looking at as you are considering, how to compare countries in terms of relative exchange rates, say between the United States, if that's where you're from, and whatever country it is that you're going into. So, now that we've gone over the major parts of the matrix, let's talk about how to use it, right? So, what I'm first going to do is enter in some countries that I may be hypothetically interested in. Now, before we get into the countries, let's talk a little bit about regions. I always recommend for anybody who's thinking about doing an entry into a country is that don't think about countries first. Start off thinking about regions, because you may have countries that are similarly situated in the world who have similar characteristics, and maybe one country might edge out the other in ways that you may not necessarily expect. So I think starting at a regional level is a much better way to go, right? Start thinking about Eastern Europe or Pacific Rim countries. Think about Africa or Southeast Asia. There are lots of regions in the world to pick from, but when we're doing this comparison, I think it's most meaningful if you pick 3 of them from the same region. So for my example, I'm going to do exactly that. So let's pretend that I'm interested in bringing my business, whatever it is, into a South American country. So we're going to choose South America as our region. So I'm going to randomly pick 3 South American countries here. Let's just say Brazil, Peru, Ecuador. And so I'm entering those in. And then I'm going to do some research on each one of these indicators to make that comparison. Like I said, the videos that I have shared before on the PESTLE, on cultural analysis, and on the currency analysis will help you understand what kind of research you need to do and what kind of concepts we're going for, right? But what's nice about this document is that it actually gives you some specific indicators that will give you that data, and it'll be good data. So if we look over here, right, you see the criteria, it's political. Here's a brief definition of what that's about. And then over here you see some key indicators. These indicators relate to specific websites you can look at in order to get data. And I'm not going to go through every one of these, right? That would take forever. But I will give you a few examples of some websites that are listed here and the kind of thing you might be doing as far as gathering data. So let's start off under political. We'll look at the first one, Corruption Perceptions Index. And I have the website here. It's from Transparency International. Again, you can find it just by copying and pasting or typing in that keyword. It'll show up for you. So I'm in the Corruptions Perceptions Index page, and over on the left it has a link of, or I should say it has a list of those countries who are the least corrupt to those that are the most. So if you look, number 1 on the ranking is Denmark, and just for fun, let's see where the United States is. Where are we? Oh, we're down here. So we have a score of 69. We're about the 24th least corrupt country in the world. Hey, we're number 24. But anyway, so this is a list of all of these countries that have, are all ranked for corruption. If I want to look for a specific country, let's say I'm looking for Brazil, right? Shows up right there, ranks number 94. Okay, and a score of 38. I may want to take those numbers in a separate spreadsheet, not the same one here, but just I'm taking notes, I'm gathering data, line up Brazil, Peru, Ecuador, create a column that says corruption perceptions index, and maybe enter some of this information in. So let's compare it to the other two. So we've got 38 and 94 for Brazil. Peru is 36 and 101, so ranks a little bit lower it seems. And Ecuador is tied for 101. So if corruption is something that you're interested in trying to avoid just on that single indicator, it seems like Brazil anyway has a better ranking than the other two. And obviously that's not a make or break. I mean, when you're looking at political factors, corruption is only one of many that you're looking at. But that's a data point, right? That's something that you can use to base your decision on whether or not you want to go into that country, right? So we have corruption perceptions index. Oh, and by the way, I can click on the map and I can also highlight different countries, right? So if I go down to Brazil, click on Brazil, it gives me the score, it gives me the rank, score change. I can click on that and it gives me a long-term score change, so I can see like how stable their level of corruption has been over a period of time, and some other updates on the fight against corruption in Brazil. So you can actually click on some links, get some news, get some data that isn't just quantitative stuff that will help you tell your story and make that comparison. So this is a really cool tool. It's something that's very useful, I think, as far as trying to gather data, right? So let's go back to our matrix again, and we're looking at economic. That's the next one. And again, over here under key indicators, we have lots of databases, all of which are free and available on Google. So I'm going to choose the ease of doing business rank as my next one. So again, I could enter that into my search engine. I already have it set up here. This is World Bank data. I'm looking at ease of doing business rankings. So if I want to look at these and compare them, I can click on the top column in order to sort by those. So the rank of ease of doing business is over here. New Zealand is number 1 in terms of the ease of doing business, right? You see the United States doing definitely better than on the corruption end. We're number 6. We're number 6. So hey, a little bit better, right? And they have lots of interesting indicators, right? How easy is it to do business in there? How easy to start a business? Dealing with construction permits, getting electricity, registering property. I mean, these are all things that are going to be helpful for you, knowing how easy it's going to do these things once you actually take your business into that area. So again, these are all individual data points that you probably ought to enter into a spreadsheet. And in this case, I think economy is probably a good category for this. You may choose to take some of this data and put it in other boxes. That's fine. But the data here is great. If I want to, see, I can select rankings by region. Got that regional thing again. Select rankings by income. Let me just Control F and see if I can find Peru in here. All right, here's Peru, highlighted. I didn't see a search bar, but hey, maybe I'm wrong about that. But if I go along here, right, you can see it's 76th in terms of ease of doing business rank, 133rd in terms of starting a business, 65 dealing with construction permits. And again, I'd enter this information into my database, and I do that search for Peru, Brazil, Ecuador, keep track of all those numbers. So that is one example of one of the indicators you can use to gather data for economic. Now let's look at social, okay? So here's a definition of social, right? And here are several different sources. So I'm going to look at the Global Entrepreneurship Index. It is the first one. And if I look at that, here's the website. And what we are looking at is how good, I guess, right? What's the quality of the entrepreneurial ecosystem inside a country? What do we mean by that? That is, Does this country have the things that an entrepreneur would need in order to start a business? Are those things all in place, or is it really, really hard to try to make a business work somehow with all the pieces? And so it's a different kind of a measure. It's a social measure, but it's good data. So you have what they call sort of a GEI index, right? And so that's the number we're looking for. And in the search engine, we can enter in and compare. So we've got Brazil, for example. It's got a 20.3 and a rank of 98. It's 96, I should say. Ecuador's 96 with a GEI of 20.5. So again, enter in your country, you get some good data. Again, you can find that stuff. So that's what you're getting with the indicators over here, right? Lots of different databases, sources of information that you might find helpful. I'm not going to go through every one of these. I think 3 is probably a good example of a start. But what I want to do now is tell you what to do with the rest of this table. So let's pretend now that you've done all this research, right? You've gone through all those key indicators, maybe picked up some data on your own elsewhere. You've read articles, you get a pretty good understanding of what these 3 countries are about, and you can start filling in numbers. And that's what's happening over here, is that you're going to fill in numbers for Brazil, Peru, and Ecuador, sort of a composite of all of the information that you brought together. Now, that is a subjective decision, right? You're going to come up with a number, which is a score where 5 is a good or low risk, and a score of 1 is a bad or high risk. So you're going to rank all of these things from 5 to 1. And like I said, it's subjective, so you may be looking at all these numbers on political, and hopefully the quantitative nature of some of what you're collecting is going to give you a good indication of whether or not it ought to be a 5, 4, 3, 2, or 1. But you're going to be inside the data, and you're going to kind of decide, like, how do these compare with each other? So if you look at political, and keep in mind I've not done the research, I'm just arbitrarily assigning numbers here, so no offense hopefully to anybody from these countries, I'm just making up these numbers. But let's say that, okay, Brazil seems sort of not as stable politically as we might expect under normal circumstances. Maybe Peru is looking pretty good, and Ecuador is sort of somewhere in the middle, right? We're entering those numbers from 1 to 5. And we would do the same thing on all of them going down. So we look at economic, and we're like, hey, Brazil's economy, it seems better than Peru's, which is, in Ecuador somewhere in the middle, right? And for now, I'm just going to enter in the numbers randomly. But obviously, you wouldn't do it randomly because you would be making number judgment calls on each one of these. So I've entered the numbers on the PESTLE, and I'm going to go ahead and just enter in arbitrary numbers on cultural and exchange as well. Like I said, I have some other videos that really explain culture in quite a bit more detail. Again, just like with the PESTLE analysis, you have links to data. This is where you can get a link to Hofstede Insights. And like I said, there's a video that explains how to use that resource already. And exchange rates, there's a lot of different sources that you can use here. And again, you can review videos if you want to understand a little bit more about why exchange rates are particularly important when making a decision. But when you get down here to the bottom, you filled out all the numbers, you look at the weighted scores, these numbers down here at the bottom will probably give you a good idea of which place you ought to go, right? So in this case, I've sort of come up with Ecuador being that one. Now, when we're looking at the PESTLE, like I said, it's basically those first 6. You'll notice also that the weights are different for different indicators. And the reason is that as this spreadsheet was designed, political, economic, and social were perceived as more or less twice as important as the other factors that follow. That may be a little bit arbitrary. I think there's a good reason for those 3 being more important. But I will also say that this is a tool, right? It's not something that you have to just like obey blindly. For example, if you're in a kind of a business where technology is a big deal, change the weight to 2, right? If you're in a situation where you think that, the politics aren't going to matter as much compared to sort of like the economic decision, you can change it down to a 1. You can play with this, right? This thing, it's to help you try to be objective about the decisions that you're going to make. Because when you're making major investments, you're wanting a business to move somewhere, or you want to export a product somewhere, you're doing something someplace overseas, you've got lots of choices, and you shouldn't be biased about, I just have this feeling about this, or I've gone and read these articles about this, and it seems like a great place, right? Well, this is a good way for you to be a little more objective about it. And so if you've done the numbers honestly, and you're making a good transposition of values from the data you're looking at to numbers that you're entering into the decision matrix, then you probably will come up with a pretty good answer that's justifiable. And that's one of the most important things to keep in mind here, is that this is a justifiable decision, right? Chances are you're going to make a decision like this, and it may be in the interest of gaining financing, and there's some financier who has some money in it, or a boss, some manager who has put you in charge of deciding where this is going to go, and you have to make that decision. So this is to not only help you make a decision, but also help you make a sale, right? When you're building a business plan, you need to have some data. And anybody who's going to want to put money in something like this is not going to just do it because you did a Google search. You've got to do more than that. And this enables you to move from the sort of arbitrary web surfing that's going to get you maybe some good information to a place where you have some good solid numbers, and you can defend your business plan, and you can defend the numbers that you have here. There's one more thing that I want to say about business plans in general, and the decision matrix is something that helps you out with this, right? But you need to think about this. Whenever you're writing a business plan, one of the most important things is making sure that you are including information that is specific to your business and specific to your industry. All of this stuff is probably going to end up in words in some way, in a document, and something where you're going to have to explain in writing, or maybe even through a presentation, why somebody ought to invest in this project. If you're getting in the weeds about a lot of details that don't have anything to do with your industry, like how many people are in the parliament, or what is the composition of their court system, right? Those are things that probably don't have a strong bearing on making that decision. The most important thing you need to be asking yourself is, what is going on inside that country that will either give me an advantage going there or some kind of a disadvantage that I want to avoid? If it's not hitting that central point, you really don't need the data, and you should just eliminate whatever is extra. Because what's going to happen is that decision maker is going to be looking at that executive summary on the top of that report and flipping to the places, looking through it, hitting the bullet points, and if it's overwhelming with a lot of stuff where they're going, okay, why do I need to know this? Then you will not be making a good case for your business. There's not much more I have to say about this. The decision matrix is a great way to organize your information and then to quantify it in a way where you can persuade a decision maker that your idea to take a business and put it someplace else in the world, is actually a really good one. So until next time, I'll see you soon. Best of luck on your business plans.